Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your morning briefing for Tuesday, the 2nd of December, 2025. This is Robert. Jared and I will be standing in for Mike today. We're going to start off with the domestic sit rep. So earlier this week, over the weekend, Democrats in the House urged Republican leadership to allow representatives to hire full-time armed staff members for security. They also want these full-time armed security staff members to be able to travel with them between D.C. and their home states. This is part of a larger negotiation for increasing security spending for representatives. And the reason given by lawmakers is that they're facing much higher levels of threats that they're receiving in by both phone calls and emails, and they're now, I think, talking about, and they have been talking about for the last couple of months, increasing security spending for individual members by $20,000 a month. And I think the Democrats are trying to get this armed staff member initiative to be covered under that new security spending. Yesterday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the Trump administration is going to investigate reports that Minnesota taxpayer dollars were diverted to the terrorist group Al-Shabab. Over the last couple of months, acting U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Joseph Thompson, has been releasing indictments unsealing indictments against some of these groups in Minnesota that have been conducting fraud. And he said that this is part of a massive network of fraud schemes in Minnesota that has stolen billions in taxpayer dollars through publicly funded programs. Bessent made this announcement actually in response to an article published by Christopher Rufo through City Journal, where they outline how these programs defraud the Minnesota state government and get access to federal dollars through programs like the state level Medicaid programs. The Supreme Court is scheduled to hold a conference meeting this week to decide if they're going to take up a lawsuit against President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order from earlier this year. And the Supreme Court could release its decision as soon as this week. And moving over to the domestic side, the Indiana Republicans released a draft mid-decade congressional map yesterday. In this map, they would flip both of the Democrat-held seats to likely Republican in the 2026 election, bringing the total redistricting potentially to a +2 for Republicans. That would be 2 in Indiana, 1 in Missouri, a potential pickup in Ohio, and 5 in Texas. The Indiana House is scheduled to vote on the final map on Friday, and the Indiana Senate will begin a special session next week to vote on the map on the 8th of December. And while this looks like it is very likely to pass in the Indiana State House, the Indiana Senate so far has been pretty soft on passing it, and this is not a guaranteed pickup for Republicans. But the Indiana Senate GOP does seem to be considering passing this map after a pretty intense pressure campaign from the White House. And then finally, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said he is going to call a special session of the Florida legislature after the first of the year to pass a new mid-decade congressional map. And that would be for the 2026 election. DeSantis said that Florida Republicans are waiting on this imminent Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act Section 2, because that would allow the state to redistrict these minority-majority congressional districts without worrying about lawsuits over racial gerrymandering. And Jared, if you could come on and take us through the global sit rep, please.
Absolutely. So, according to a newly released report, China's weapons manufacturers had an overall 10% overall drop in revenue in 2024, and this was due to the corruption purges that we've been covering for a few years now. Now, there is one outlier here. China's top shipbuilder actually reported an 8.7% increase in revenue, so they were almost entirely reversed from that. And this is all data prior to the major purge this summer, which removed numerous officials for corruption at the top of China's military. So I think what we're seeing here is these ongoing purges are actually going to affect China's material readiness for 2027 and will be a contributing factor to pushing it back. Then just a hit over in Korea, South Korea's president held a cabinet meeting where several members pushed for Korea to develop nuclear weapons. And President Lee said It would be great to go nuclear, but unrealistic due to economic and international sanctions that would immediately follow and U.S. disapproval. Lee also said that this whole talk could jeopardize the U.S. Korea deal to give Korea uranium enrichment capabilities. Then down in South America, President Trump promised hell to pay if Honduras attempted to change its general election results from the weekend. Now, Trump has endorsed the current front runner, but the third place candidate, who's also the current Honduran defense minister, is accusing Trump of foreign interference for that endorsement and alleging mass voting fraud. That despite the results coming in despite the election happening over the weekend, we're still several days without actually a significant amount of the vote. Now, over in Venezuela, according to anonymous sources speaking to Reuters, President Trump denied Venezuelan President Maduro's request for amnesty on a 21 November phone call and gave Maduro a week to flee Venezuela. The sources that spoke to Reuters here also claimed that Trump ended the safe passage period by announcing the closure of Venezuelan airspace over the weekend, which we covered yesterday.
All right. Thank you for that, Jared. Let's move on. We're tracking 73 protests today. And then we're going to move over to the high side where we are going to talk about the Homeland operations update and some of these protest groups that are preparing for resistance to Operation Swamp Sweep in New Orleans, Louisiana. And also the Cleveland DSA, who are doing the same for an expected surge into Cleveland, Ohio. And then we are going to talk about the first winter storm of the season, which is hitting the Northeast and Midwest this week. If you'd like to join us to get access to the high side, you can go over to forwardobserver.com/trial, where you can get a 7-day free trial. Jared, take us to the high side, please.